Hello, this is lecture 13 of functional neuroanatomy, and today we're going to continue talking about the vestibular system. So this is vestibular function 2. I'm going to start off by talking about an overview of vestibular reflexes, and then we're going to go into three specific reflexes. The vestibular ocular reflex, and to do that we're going to have to talk some about extraocular muscle innervation. Then we'll go through the circuit, and then we'll end talking about that reflex with nystagmus, which is a specific movement of the eye. And then we're going to talk about the vestibulocoelic reflex. Sometimes this is also called the vestibulocervical reflex. And we'll end up talking about vestibulospinal reflexes. You've heard about these tracts before, the lateral vestibulospinal tract and the medial vestibulospinal tract, but we'll talk about how they work to help the vestibular system help us with balance. And then we're going to review a video and go through how the vestibular system contributes to certain functions. Okay, so if we move over here to our slides. If you remember, I told you in the previous lecture that the vestibular system plays a role in a couple of different things. It plays a key role in balance and coordination, orientation with respect to gravity, particularly of our head, and the coordination of head and eye movements. And it does this by contributing to rapid automatic behaviors or reflexes that enable us to keep our eyes on an object of visual interest, enables us to keep our head stabilized even if we're moving our body, and it enables our extensors and our proximal and axial muscles to stabilize us while we're moving, or if something is moving us. So one of the most critical functions of the vestibular system is its role in coordinating head and eye movements. So what happens, and this is the start of our talking about the vestibular ocular reflex. What happens is if we have our eyes fixed on a target and we move our head in one direction, our eyes will move in the opposite direction so that we can keep our visual grasp on that object. And this is showing it for a tilt to the head. So here we have our eyes pointing forward and the head is straight up and down. If he tilts his head to the right, the eyes automatically tilt to the left to keep the eyes on that visual target. So we are going to talk about that. The first thing we'll talk about is why the VOR is important. And I've used up all my board space, which wasn't very good. So hang on. I'm going to move up this a little bit and make it so I can actually reach it afterwards. Okay, so the importance of the VOR, which again stands for the vestibular ocular reflex. It's important, one, because visual transduction is relatively slow. Have we talked about visual transduction yet? What? No? Okay. I can't even remember. So visual transduction. So what I mean by this is that the process of converting light energy into a neuronal signal takes a little bit of time. There's multiple steps in the visual process. So this is kind of slow. Another thing that's important is that there's only a small part of our retina, which is where our photoreceptors are, that is able to discriminate fine detail in a visual object. So only, and this is called the fovea. Only the fovea is able to discriminate fine detail. So we want, if we have an object of visual interest, we want to be able to focus our fovea on that object of interest and do it quickly. And there's one other thing, and I don't remember what it is. No, I guess there's only two. Okay, so for a demonstration of this, and how important and how well the VOR works, what I'd like you to do is pick up a piece of paper that has writing on it, or your tablet or something, and then take that piece of paper and start moving it. And notice how quickly it starts to blur, even if you're not moving that paper very much. So try that. And then when you're done with that, try the kind of the opposite experiment, where you're holding the paper straight but moving your head back and forth really fast. And what you might notice is that you're much better able to focus on the paper when your head is moving. And that's due to this vestibular ocular reflex and the ability to keep our fovea on an object of interest, even if our head is moving. Okay, so before we talk about the vestibular ocular reflex, we have to talk about muscles that move our eyes. So we have a diagram here. The diagram has been loaded up onto Canvas, so you can print it out. If you are going to print it out, you're going to need 3 copies. So you can go to you can always pause the video if you need to go print these out. You can also just draw them freehanded. That's what I did up on the board here. But you're going to need 3 copies because we're going through 3 different circuits. So this is our VOR, vestibular ocular reflex. And like I said, the first thing we need to talk about is the muscles that move the eye. So we are going to be discussing horizontal eye movements for this video. As an example, it's going to work in the other planes as well. So one of our muscles, these red squiggly things I've drawn here, indicate extraocular muscles. This one over here is the lateral rectus muscle. This is the midline, so this would be the right eye, and the eye would be pointing towards the ceiling, and this is the left eye, so this would be the cornea up here. So if you contract the lateral rectus muscle, it's going to move the eye to the right, and it's going to move the eye laterally, which is called abduction. So if you contract, get abduction, which is going to move the eye laterally. These 2 muscles here, that would be, so the nose would be in the middle. These are the medial rectus muscles. Okay, so that's a medial rectus, and so is this one. When the medial rectus muscles contract, that's going to move the eye towards the midline. And this is called adduction, which is A-D-D. Adduction. So those are, when you say them, it's hard to tell the difference, but the spelling, you can tell the difference. So these are going to be important. And so this is going to be our medial rectus on this eye, and this is going to be our lateral rectus on this eye. So we've already learned a little bit about cranial nerves. And cranial nerves that innervate these muscles happen to be the ocular motor nucleus, which is cranial nerve 3, and the abducens nucleus, which is cranial nerve 6. So let's go ahead, if you haven't already, label these. So the cranial nerve 3, the ocular motor nucleus, is located in the midbrain, very close to the midline. And then our abducens nucleus is located in the pons medulla region, and it is, there's again one on each side. And then lateral to the abducens nucleus are the vestibular nuclei, which I've drawn in purple here. Okay, so hopefully everybody is caught up as far as that goes. And then we will start our circuit. So one thing I haven't drawn yet, because I forgot, is our semicircular canal. So let's draw just a really simple depiction of a horizontal semicircular canal. So the utricle would be towards the midline, as we've already learned. Our hair cell is going to be at the boundary here. And this is the hair bundle with the tallest stereocilia towards the midline. If you remember, this is going to be our membranous duct. That's going to be filled with endolymph. So that's going to bathe our hair bundle and our stereocilia. And then outside of that is going to be our perilymph. Okay, so let's decide that we have a head rotation. Again, we're talking about the horizontal semicircular canal here. If we have a head rotation to the left, so this is just my arrow indicating head rotation. Is that bony area is going to turn towards the left. Nope. But this endolymph, because it's a liquid, is going to have inertia and it's going to lag. So relative to the head, the endolymph is going to go in the opposite direction. So if the head is going left, the endolymph relative to the head movement is going to move this way. Okay, because of that lag. So what that does is that's going to push the hair bundle towards the tallest stereocilium, or the kinocilium. That's going to result in an increase of glutamate. And that glutamate is going to be released onto the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. So this is cranial nerve 8, specifically the vestibular branch. So that cell body is going to be located in the ganglia. Oops, ganglia doesn't have an L there. And then the central process is going to go to its ipsilateral ventral vestibular nucleus. Okay, good so far? Okay, so we get an increase of glutamate here. We're going to have an increase of activity here. So these are just designating action potentials. That's going to lead to an increased release of glutamate in the vestibular nuclei, an increase in activity of the vestibular nuclei. And the vestibular nuclei have several different populations of neurons in them. So one of these populations is going to be, so we're going to have right here, and this neuron is going to project to the contralateral abducens nucleus. Okay, so if you can't see it, there is a synapse here. There's a release of glutamate on the vestibular nucleus neurons. Those neurons, some of them are going to project to the contralateral abducens nucleus. In the abducens nucleus, we have different populations of neurons as well. One of these are our lower motor neurons that are going to innervate the lateral rectus muscle. Okay, so it's going to go up and innervate our lateral rectus. So this is our lower motor neuron that innervates the lateral rectus. And hey, guess what? This is called our abducens nerve, because it's going to abduct the eye, and the cell body is in the abducens nuclei. Okay, so we've got our head rotation to the left. Now we have our right eye that's going to go to the right, because this is going to release acetylcholine, contract this, and then that's going to cause the right eye to move to the right. All good so far. But we also need our left eye to move to the right. So what happens is that in this abducens nucleus, there's another population of neurons. What color do I want to make them? I'll make them blue. And these are projection neurons. And they also are going to be affected by this neuron coming over here. What they do is they are going to go across the midline again and ascend up to its contralateral ocular motor nucleus. Okay, so this is a projection interneuron. That projection interneuron is then going to synapse to and excite neurons in the ocular motor nucleus, specifically lower motor neurons that go on to innervate the medial rectus muscle. So that's going to release acetylcholine, cause that to contract, and now we have that left eye also moving to the right. So we have both eyes moving together to the right with the head turned to the left. And this is the ocular motor nerve. Actually, these axons travel in the ocular motor nerve, because the ocular motor nerve actually contains other things, but some of those are lower motor neuron axons. So that's our vestibular ocular reflex circuit that allows our eyes to move the opposite direction as our head is, so that we can keep an object of interest on our fovea so that we can continue to look at it. So we have a slide or two to show you that goes along with this. So let me pull this down again. Oh, I've lost my laser. Oh, there it is. There's the diagram. So this is a figure from your Nolte textbook, and it shows the same thing. So you can go through this again. And again, this is also a head rotation to the left. So it's showing you the hair cells in that horizontal semicircular canal. We have a rotation to the left indicated by this blue arrow. The endoliph is going to move relative to the head to the right. We're going to get movement of that stereocilia towards the tallest stereocilium, increase in the release of glutamate. I want to remind you that there's a baseline level of activity in the vestibular system. So at rest, hair cells are releasing some glutamate, and that's going to become important later. So that's going to increase our release of glutamate, increase activity in this vestibular cochlear nerve, increase activity in the vestibular nuclei neurons. There's our neuron that goes over to the contralateral abducens nucleus. Here's our lower motor neuron that's going to go to innervate that lateral rectus muscle on the eye that's contralateral to this initial stimulus. And then we have this other population of cells in the abducens nucleus that is going to cross the midline, ascend in the medial longitudinal fasciculus up to the ocular motor nucleus. The ocular motor nucleus contains lower motor neurons that will innervate and cause that medial rectus muscle on the ipsilateral side to this original excitation to contract, so we also get the left eye moving to the contralateral side. So I'm going to stop there, and in the next video we're going to go through a couple of other things about the vestibular ocular reflex, and then we're going to start moving into the vestibulocholic reflex. So see you in the next video.